Geoffrey Gorman grew up in a Huck Finn kind of environment with old quarries and woods filled with dilapidated barns and kind of fallen houses. And he was surrounded by really interesting people and characters and animals, and all of these things had a really large influence and affinity for his aged objects. He has been creating beautifully gorgeous sculpture with found objects, and we call it found material sculptures in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he lives. For like 15 years, he's been working there in that way. He shows his work around the United States and has exhibited in Korea and China, South Korea and China. And over the last several years, he has been written about in the New York Post, Southwest Art, American Craft, American Style, Cloth, Paper, Scissors. You guys are in for a treat. His work is in numerous public and private collections. Many of you might already know of it, and if you don't, you are in for a real treat. So without any further ado, I will bring in Geoffrey Gorman. Welcome.
Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
Nice introduction. Thanks, you guys. I'm really excited to be a part of the Peters Valley curriculum and to work with you guys. I've been teaching workshops now for about 3 years, and it's really exciting for me, being a studio artist otherwise. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start a slideshow and then just kind of go over how I came to be doing what I'm doing. It was a pretty serendipitous path that I've been on here. I was, before this many years ago, I did go to the museum school in photography. I was a gallery dealer, I was a curator, I was an arts advisor. About 15 years ago, I stumbled into making mixed media sculptures. I was part of a group of artists that were going to do a show in at St. John's College, and just for the heck of it, I started picking up found and lost material. And literally, this one of the first pieces I made right here, I had some rags and some wire and some old sticks and some rocks in my backyard. You can tell I didn't really clean my backyard. And I just decided that I'd start making figures out of what I found. I had just come back from India on a trek, and I saw a lot of people by the trail kind of beaten down. And so my first pieces were kind of about these people that I saw along the trail here. This is another early piece that I did. I was also using sculptor's wax. This is, you'll see a little progression here. This was a great blue heron. This was my first attempt at a great blue heron. So you've got rags, sticks, wire, sculptor's wax in there. So there was a bit of ephemera. When I started, I also started building birds and things like that. The nest here you can see is from a palm tree in Hawaii. And then there's sticks and rags and wire that I got while exploring the mountains around Santa Fe. My work is also really influenced by the places I go and the material I find. Like you can see here, it's an old wagon wheel that I found in a junk shop. And I just thought, who would hold something like this? And I came up with this baboon, and then you can see his mane and his hair are made out of steel wool. The body is foam that's been wrapped in canvas and then wire, and then I have a process of rusting that I'm hoping that you'll feel that maybe this is an artifact from thousands of years ago and has various kinds of trophies on him that identifies him as being from some sort of a clan. We don't really know where he's from. About 5 years ago, a bike shop actually moved into my neighborhood, and I was dumpster diving, and I had never worked with bike tires. Then I started working with inner tubes. So these two river otters are wrapped in inner tubes, then wrapped with wire and various flotsam and jetsam kind of applied to them. Probably the largest piece to date, I did a large deer, which was in the Santa Fe Convention Center for many, many years until it was kind of a funny story. The workers didn't like it because down where it's underneath its haunch was, I had put a padlock there, and they felt that that was very disturbing, so they asked me to remove it. birds, animals. I basically journal. I kind of think about what inspires me, stories, anecdotes, sometimes the material. These are two ibises that, it was very funny. It was the first piece that I wrapped in these inner tubes, and I brought it to my dealer. I was fortunate enough to work with a woman called Jane Sauer, who was a very well-known craft dealer in Santa Fe. And she looked at this piece and she said, "I've never seen anything like it. It won't sell." And of course, the next week, her biggest collector came in and wanted the piece. I do a variety of series. I also have a dreaming series where these animals are white. You all, are you seeing these scribbles on the screen, or is it just me? I guess it's just me. I don't know what's happening.
We see the scribbles, but we can also see the photos. So it's
yeah,
okay.
I don't know how that happened. I don't know where those little gremlins. So some of my I work I'm series based. So I had this experience where I ran into a bunch of animals that were white, and I had been in the hospital and I was heavily medicated. And so I have done a whole series of animals that are wrapped in canvas, and then they're wrapped in wire, and then they're rusted, and that's the only color that you'll see on them. This piece is based on these medieval, the medieval monks would illustrate the sides of the illuminated manuscripts that they did with these very daring drawings, and they were very risque, and they were often sexually based. Rabbits were often a symbol of power, and so I took one of these drawings and I basically turned it into an illustration. So this rabbit is riding on a dog and holding an owl. So it's based on this early medieval illustration. I picked up welding. This is a praying mantis that I welded. It's got a wood body in there. Then there are bike tires and various rods that I use to articulate the legs and the antennae and things like that. And it's mounted on the wall. It's pretty large. It's probably about 5 feet tall. In fact, you can see it behind me if you look on my wall there. And you can also see a wild dog down below. It's an African wild dog. Recently, I've started working with art consultants around the United States, and I was asked to do a series of New Mexico animals to put into some new houses that are being built at a ski area in New Mexico. So this is a New Mexico antelope. And you can see that there are bike tires on it. There's the canvas, the wire. It's all been aged. So I'm almost looking for like a ceramic glaze in the finish that I want to accomplish by rusting and staining and having a chemical enhancement, again, to make all of this work feel like it's maybe from an ancient culture. That's kind of the glue, I think, that holds together all of my work, is the finishing process that I use on this work. This is another recent piece. I was very influenced by Edward J. Muybridge. I was a photography student at the museum school. Photography is a big love of mine. He was the first person to show that when horses ran, that all 4 hoofs came off the ground at the same time, but he also was able to articulate these creatures that we can't see. So I did these 3 rabbits running to, again, kind of give you a sense of what it might look if there were stop motion and you were able to see the animals. So that is the end of my slideshow. And so it's been an interesting journey for me. It's been about 15 years. I started with figurative work. I eventually started working with small animals. I've gotten larger and larger. I also do abstracted bird wings. Recently, I've been doing a series of small songbirds in New Mexico. So I go from really small to large to different types of material. And again, it's really journaling. It's what I intersect with on a daily basis, which really inspires me to create these pieces. So it's been a terrific journey.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I just love the gestures in those animals. I can't get over, they're just beautiful.
Thank you.
Love them. So our next artist could not be here with us this evening, but he did send a video, and I'd like to share a little bit about him with you and also share the video. And his name is Jovencio de la Paz. He has had a family upset and wasn't able to be here, so we'll send him our good vibes and hopefully things will work out well for him. His work explores the intersection of textile processes such as weaving and dyeing and stitch work as they relate to the broader concerns of language, histories of colonization, migrancy, ancient technology, and speculative futures. The video that he sent to us is going to show you some work that he had done with computer images and a little bit of the weaving. So it's kind of an interesting intersection. He received his MFA in fibers from the Cranbrook Academy of Art and his BFA with an emphasis on fiber and material studies from the School of Art in Chicago, Art Institute. And he regularly teaches at craft schools throughout the country and is currently assistant professor and curriculum head of fibers at the University of Oregon. He has exhibited work in solo and group exhibitions, both nationally and internationally. So let me move my screen and share with you. Let's see. His video.
Hi, I'm Jovencio de la Paz. I'm an artist and educator living and working in Eugene, Oregon, where I'm the head
Beth, sorry, I think you need to keep your sound on because we can't hear it anymore.
working with digital technologies. My process often begins with drawing, but those drawings are inside the computer and go through a lot of different kinds of processing. So in these images, I began with very, very simple line drawings, and then through an algorithmic process, sort of build up the surface. And then usually those go through other kinds of processing to end up as weavable sort of patterns for the digital TC2 loom. Here at Pro Shadow, I was able to sort of start with drawing in the computer, use the algorithms, and then immediately go to the press. So I think in a lot of ways, with the weavings, there's a lot of information that gets embedded or encoded or lost, perhaps. So there's something really special about being able to go really directly from computer to print. There's a sort of purity of the line or a kind of hard edge that really brings out kind of opticality, the sort of frenzied, fractured surface. So we've had 3 different drawings in my time here. The first one is a 2-color print. It's really, really direct, just almost exactly what was on the screen. The darker line work is actually printed on top of a much fainter pink color. And what's interesting is the pink is almost completely disappears into that kind of frenzied surface. The second image, a little bit simpler drawing that's printed on top of pink and yellow spectrum. I was really amazed when Judith Bauman, the master printer, she had suggested trying kind of a spectrum for this print, and the spectrum was so luxurious and beautiful. And then when the second layer, the line drawing layer, was put on top of it, all of this crazy optical kind of illusions started emerging, which I'm super excited with. And then the final image is a 3-color print. So essentially, there's a flat layer of color, and then we printed a line drawing in blue, in dark blue, and then a final line drawing in green. But that final layer, that final line drawing that's in green is shifted 180 degrees so that you get this moire effect. I'm really much more interested in setting up parameters in the computer or in the drawing process and sort of allowing the algorithms I use to dictate what the image is like in the end. I kind of, I'm aware of the relationship here op art or with this sort of perhaps glitch art aesthetic. But in a way, I am more interested in how the computer might design an artwork, or how the algorithms might create a composition, sort of exposing like a kind of artificial creativity or computational creativity. And so these images are kind of a collaboration with humans and machines, and that's a thread that runs through all of my work. You know, there's a very, very rich history between computers and looms. My work is often trying to suss out that history and sort of understand the way in which the very idea of computation has this kind of relationship to textiles. So, for example, when you think about the first IBM computers, they will all run through punch cards. So programmers would punch various cards, and that binary operation of whole or no whole is a very fundamental like binary language of programming, and it's the same language in weaving. So in weaving, either a thread goes up or a thread stays down. So it's either 1 or 0. On RTC2, we have an enormous, very, very long white cotton warp, and that remains on the loom. You can see it here. And then depending on what structures I use or what different kinds of patterns I input into the weaving software, these white threads either are raised or stay down. In all my work, I'm more interested in sort of creating a circumstance in a unique piece of software, or by manipulating software to generate those fields of black and white pixels. So that's a really broad, you know, you could translate sound into black and white pixels. You could translate basically any kind of data, and the loom could deal with those outputs as weaving. So we wrote a specific program for this textile that produced these arrays of bitmaps, essentially. This is a series of monoprints that I got to work on. And they look quite different from maybe the other work, but they both share the sort of root in terms of using software, using artificial intelligence, using sort of algorithms to produce imagery. So the landscapes you see here were generated completely with artificial intelligence. So they're completely computer-generated places. They don't exist anywhere in the physical world. And generally, I will take these, and they're very, very long kind of horizontal weavings, so these sort of continuous landscapes. But here we sort of chose a section of that imagery to print with the lithopress, and then added in these blocks of color with a monoprinting process. And so, you know, when I started working with this artificial intelligence, I was really struck by how, you know, you would draw a very simple line, take that line and try to put it at the horizon as a kind of art making, and it generates very photorealistic landscapes, essentially. So then I go through a process of turning that photo into a bitmap, and then it becomes a viewable file. What I think is really exciting about and different about these prints is that I don't work with color in the weavings, and these weavings are very, very sort of monochromatic and kind of ghostly. But with introducing color, this whole other kind of language sort of emerges, which is, for me, they really evoke a kind of problematic nostalgia, or a kind of fantasy or colonial idealism about the land. And so they evoke that, but they are non-places, you know, they don't exist anywhere. So it's pure fantasy, sort of in the way that I think we relate to wilderness often as tourists. You know, they don't really, we're not really connected to the place, but we see it as a kind of image to be consumed or experience. And you know, I think that's a really interesting and fraught place. On the one hand, the land is so easily thought of as something that is simply an object of my consumption or my experience. So there's a kind of tension, I think, in these prints, which I'm really interested in. From a distance, they do look like postcards of national parks. There's something very familiar about them. I think on closer inspection, through maybe the strangeness of the color or the strangeness of the bitmap sort of clouds, you see that something is amiss in these spaces. And I think maybe the viewer can unpack a little bit of that strangeness, so that kind of conflicted quality we have with landscape through the evidence of those, purely through the sort of visual cues. The colors also, I'm not working with color very much in my weaving. There's something about, I got to learn so much from the master printer, Judith, and the amazing team here, just about layering and space, and the way color can evoke memory, all of those things, really rich kind of experience. And very exciting because, this is a process that I don't quite know enough about, and so you really have to rely on the incredible skill of others, and there's something really beautiful about that process.
Okay, am I back on all around? Let's see. Okay. All right, so Godspeed to Jovencio, and hopefully things will turn out well for him and he'll be in good shape soon. Bruce Dehnert is our next guest tonight. He's not really a guest, he's a staple here at Peters Valley, and we are going to have him speak about something that's really near and dear to his heart. He's also been very busy building a new Noborigama this summer, so it's pumping over there. Bruce received his MFA at Alfred University, and he's taught at universities in the United States and in New Zealand and Malaysia. His work can be found in numerous national and international collections. Bruce has written many articles and co-authored the book Simon Leach, Pottery Handbook. Dehnert has recently led wood firing workshops in Japan, India, and the United States. He's a member of the International Academy of Ceramics and is the head of ceramics here at Peters Valley School of Craft. Welcome, Bruce.
Hi, Beth. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am going to... Can you see that?
Yep.
How about that?
We can see Anagama.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just going to shift something here really quick. Good. Hello, everybody. And thank you, Beth, for the introduction. I really appreciate that. And thank you to my fellow instructors. I'm sorry that we couldn't be all together sharing meals and conversations and so forth. That's always a highlight of the week that the workshops that I teach. This week or this year was going to be special for me because for 20 years that I've been here, I've been firing the Onigama with visiting instructors. And when I first arrived at Peters Valley, I started a program whereby I would bring in visiting folks who were renowned for their firing and of the Onigama. And so it has been 20 years of a lot of learning for me and really enjoying the camaraderie with the various instructors who have come to fire the kiln. And a little while ago, I decided that at 20 years, I was going to run the workshop myself. So I'm quite sad that it isn't taking place. What would have been happening tonight on the last Friday night of the workshop, which is a 2.5-3 week workshop, is that the kiln would be cooling. We would be starting to open side stokes and firebox openings and so forth, keeping the chimney closed so it didn't pull a strong draft through the kiln. And then on this Sunday morning, we would have unloaded the kiln. So that's what would have been going on. And for those of you who aren't familiar with a onagama or an onagama firing, it is the largest kiln here at Peters Valley. It's a large tube-shaped kiln that has a little bit of a shape of a whale. And you feed the wood through 7 different ports, but the main port through which you feed it is called the main firebox. And you put a lot of wood in there. So whoops, it is not. Let's see if that works.
I had the same problem. Are you using your mouse?
Let's see, I'm using, oh, let's see if the mouse works. There we go. Can you see that?
That happened to me today. I don't know why.
Okay. Yeah, I was using the arrows, the little arrows to the right. Sorry about that. But that's the main firebox that you see through there. And so for tonight's show, what I thought I would do is introduce some of you to the various artists who have become and fired the onagama during my 20 years here, and just talk a little bit about that. And that photograph was taken just yesterday. So that's what the kiln looks like when it's sitting empty. And it's a very lonely kiln this year. The little white cylinders down in the lower center of the screen there are called tatami bricks. And those tatami bricks don't belong to the onagama. Those actually go into the new Naborigama that we're building right now. But everything else belongs to the onagama. So there are shelves on your left and there are bricks and posts on your right. The posts support the shelves and the shelves hold the pots. So there's a lot of material that goes into that kiln. The kiln is 55 feet long. It has 5 steps, so it steps up. And it's considered a very, very difficult kiln to fire. One of the reasons for that is because the incline of the kiln is so steep. It also has kind of a tight throat arch through which the gases and flames exit. And it also has a huge firebox. So that firebox that you can see there is about 4.5 feet tall or so. And you load the kiln through that big opening there. This is a photograph of, for 20 years, my wife, Govinda Cordu, who's a painter, has graced our firings with a painting on the door of the kiln. So that door rolls down over the stoke hole where you actually put the wood during the firing. She has devised a way of representing each art, something about the artist who is coming and firing. So this was last year's door, and last year the firing was led by John Dix from Kobe, Japan, and Nick Schwartz from Mendocino, California. So the mountain there is Mount Fuji, and the leaves are medicinal botanicals from Mendocino, where Nick is from. And then those images, they're painted with latex, and those images disappear during the firing. So they're very short-lived. The kiln requires 12 to 15 cords of wood. We fire for 5 days, 24 hours a day, and we fire in shifts. And the assistants in the program each year, I wish I could show you all the photographs of all the assistants who have split all this wood over the years, but 12 to 15 cords is a lot of wood. We use a mix of pine and hardwoods, and the assistants and myself and a couple of volunteers split that wood starting in May for the August firing. So the kiln is always fired in August. So it takes us a long time to split that wood, and you can see that the wood is mostly split down to about 3 inches in size. The smaller the diameter of the wood, the quicker that wood can give off its BTUs. So we need that efficiency. These are views inside the main fire mouth. during the loading. So you can see the bricks holding up the shelves and the pots sitting on those shelves and also on the floor of the kiln. The photograph on the right are last year's instructors, Nick Schwartz on the left and John Dix from Kobe, Japan. So I want to pay particular homage to one of my best friends. This is Charlie Lidd on the left, and Charlie was my assistant in 2003, arrived at Peters Valley in 2002 from Rutgers University, so he's a local guy. And Charlie fell in love with firing very early in his career, and every single year for almost 20 years, he has been by my side, just like in that photograph, and we prepare for the firing, we load, help load, and so forth. We're never too far apart, this guy and I. So he's very special and brings a lot of special skills and ability to move and groove with the high pressure of a firing like this, a firing workshop. So special shout out to Charlie. This is a shot of the group from last year. Group dynamics are super important during a firing. The better a group gets along, the more efficient a firing, the better results you get. And last year's firing, led by Nick and John, was really one of the best firings. And this is just after we have lit the front firebox. And these are the different participants in the workshop. This is John, one of our assistants last year. Laura Dortman went out and bought these wacky, I don't know what you would call it, overalls. And John really took a liking to his, so he wore his constantly during the fire. Looks like a peppermint candy cane. So this is the view of the kiln when it's at highest temperature. Highest temperature is about cone 12, which is around 2,400 degrees or maybe even a little bit hotter. And you can see the blowback from the flames there, and those folks are stoking the sides of the kiln. Like I said, there are 7 places you can stoke, not just the front. And you can see the density of the smoke there. It's coming out of it really hot. The kiln was built in 1980 by Katsuyuki Sakazumi from Japan. And it has been with us that whole time. So we are at 40 years with this kiln. The first couple of folks I want to show you are, they're all special to me, but these guys are super special because they are my mentors. And I started Onagama firing back in 1982 with this guy on the right, Fred Olson. I built my first Onagama with him and have fired a number of times, including a couple of times here at Peters Valley. And Fred's always been, he wrote the book on the kiln, on kiln building. And he's very, very special because he has paid a lot of attention in his career to experimentation. So this kiln on the left is built out of a fiber blanket, and he's traveled the world experimenting. The next guy is Shiro Otani. He was my second Onagama firing in 1983, I guess, something, or 82, something like that. So I was his assistant in a program just like Peters Valley going way back then. And Shiro and I have maintained an adult long friendship. And so he has come and fired our kiln a couple of times. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to him. He's one of those people who shares every little nugget of knowledge that he has and shares it joyfully. He's also a California Angels fan, so I try to forgive him for that. He's from Shigaraki. Another guy who came and fired is super special. He's the president of the International Academy of Ceramics now, and his name is Torbjorn Kvasbo. And one of the things that I love about Torbjorn's practice as an artist is that he does everything from, super high temperature Onagama firing, all the way down to oxidation firing in electric kilns. He doesn't let anything limit him and so forth. And he's just a force of absolute nature. If I didn't say it already, he's from Norway. And he's just a super articulate, just no holds barred kind of guy. So firing the Onagama with him at Peters Valley was a real real interesting experience. Another guy is more local, and this is Jeff Shapiro from up in New York, not too far from here. And like all of these folks who come and fire our kilns, they have two qualities to them that I would say, and Jeff fits both of them so perfectly. He's super open about his information, doesn't hold anything back, and he isn't afraid to fire this kiln. There are a lot of people who are, are a little hesitant to fire our kiln because it pushes you to the max. And so everybody that you're going to see in these pictures are folks who weren't afraid to take on the challenge. And I have a deep respect for that kind of artistic pursuit and so forth, open-mindedness. This is Kristen Moeller. Now, Kristen, as many of you know, is the executive director of Peters Valley. But as far as the Onagama is concerned, Kristen was a first. She was the first woman in the United States to lead a Onagama firing workshop. And it happened right here at Peters Valley. And she has an Onagama not too far away that she is loading tonight. She might not even be here right now because they're starting to load her kiln and getting ready for a firing that starts next week. This T-bowl on the left is Hikadashi, which means that at a lower temperature than the finished temperature, the pot is actually taken out of or removed from the kiln with tongs and fast cooled. So it creates a different color in the glass because of that extreme drop in temperature. So Kristen does a lot of research into that. She's pretty obsessed with that. This guy is Bill Shillelgh's, and Bill Shillelgh's, if you're a student of his, some of you probably know him, but if you're a student of his, you're one of the most lucky people on the planet. He has taught at Nassau County Community College out on Long Island for many, many years, and I did a lot of wood firing with him back in the 80s when I was at Hunter College. And Bill came and did my first summer here. Bill was the one who led that workshop. So I have a special place in my heart for Bill, and he's a maniac, this guy, and you learn a lot from him. So if you want to go to college somewhere right now as an undergraduate, I highly recommend his program at Nassau. Now, this is Dan Murphy pointing at Dan Murphy. Dan Murphy on the left is the potter, and Dan Murphy on the right is one of the world's greatest baseball players. And Dan comes from Utah, and he just has a really lively way of teaching, and his work is fantastic. This is an example of his work. He does a lot of reduction cooling. This is Todd Piker, and Todd Piker is one of those guys who's a bit of an outlier. He was an apprentice to Michael Cardew, one of Cardew's last apprentices. And Todd's studio is up in Cornwall, Connecticut. And Todd doesn't fire necessarily for the heavy active surface on pots. He kind of follows a more, the older traditions, some of it even coming from China, where you might fire in sagers or you fire very lightly and in oxidation. So he's not looking for the real goopy kind of thing. And when Todd was here, he fired this kiln just really beautifully according to his aesthetics and so forth. So there were some great pots that came out of it. This is John Dix. And John has been here a number of times because I just absolutely love John and I love his work. And he's a great guy. He grew up in Michigan, but moved to Japan many years ago, 30 years ago, and has made a life there. And he has an Onagama kiln just outside of Kobe in a little village called Sasayama. And there are monkeys that come and hassle him while he's firing the kiln. And he's just a beautiful dude. Last summer, John fired the Onagama for his second time, and he fired it with his buddy Nick Schwartz from California. Nick lives outside of Mendocino in a little, I don't know, a nook and a cranny up in a gully called Comchi, California. And he has quite the outfit there. And Nick is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from Todd Piker. Nick goes for total surface and just, you get that ash melting as soon as you can and just let it fly. This is Jason Hess. Jason teaches at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff and has run that very important wood firing program for, I'm going to guess 20 years, maybe something like that. But Jason is just a super happy guy and just very free with his knowledge, which he has a lot of because he has a ton of wood kilns there at the school, and he runs a really dynamic program for wood firing there at the campus. This is Ashwini Bhatt. Ashwini is originally from India. Ashwini was just on with us last week. And Ashwini studied with one of my closest friends, Ray Meeker and Deb Smith, who started the Golden Bridge Pottery in India. And then moved to the United States and has been here for a while. She lives in Petaluma, California. One of the things that Ashwini, I would say, did for the Anagama program is that she crawled inside the kiln, studied it, and then came up with this brilliant idea to make larger the side stoke firebox and get rid of the other two fireboxes, actually. And so just go with the main firebox and the side stoke, go with a larger firebox there, and it was brilliant. It has done a lot of good for us the last couple of years. This is Heidi Kreichet. So Heidi was Ashwini's partner in crime, teaching the workshop that year, and Heidi hails from outside of Los Angeles, California, and has also worked for Don Rice, who passed away, as many of you know, out in just south of Flagstaff, Arizona. Her work is chiseled and it's cut with wire and so forth. Very, very activated work, and mostly sculptural is what she worked on when she was here. This is Pete Callis, who many of you know lives in Belvedere, New Jersey, just south of here, about 40 minutes. And Pete has an Anagama there and has been very important to American Anagama firing. This is Akira Satake, who is one fantastic musician as well as ceramist. This guy has such an incredible facility. He's just pure talent, pure genius. I don't know what to say about Akira. He can do anything with clay and he can do anything with a banjo. And he's just a joy. He's got a great rapport with everybody, and he's a great joke teller, and really a beautiful human being. Speaking of beautiful human beings, this is Jack Troy. Jack is one of America's top wood and salt firers. He wrote the book on salt firing, and he wrote a book on wood firing as well. He hails from Pennsylvania. He's also a renowned poet and thinker. Excuse me. He works a lot in porcelain, so a lot of people in the country know him through his porcelain. Troy Porcelain has done a lot of research into clay bodies and so forth, and he used to teach at Juniata College. And he's just remarkable. I mean, just a remarkable person, and a wonderful workshop leader and wonderful wood fire. Now, one of the things that I look into about instructors is, are they good teachers? You know, it's one thing being able to fire a kiln. The other thing is being able to convey your philosophies and thoughts and so forth, abilities, techniques, and so forth to students. This guy is top of the heap. This is Simon Levin. And Simon, I would be hard pressed to come up with anybody who I've dealt with in 40 years of watching people teach workshops and so forth that would knock Simon off that perch. He is so detailed. He knows so much about proportions of kilns and how kilns might behave and so forth. He's just really a brilliant young maker. And so if you ever have an opportunity to study with him at a workshop, man, do not miss it, because he's fantastic. This is Matthew Sheeman, and Matthew has been down at Marian Art Center down in St. Petersburg, Florida for a number of years. And one of the things that I just love about Matt is that he really concentrates on clay body big time, and he can really get into the nuances of clay and really try to figure out what's going to work best. He has quite the amazing program at Marian, but he has moved on. He just moved to North Carolina, has left that position. he also, one of the things I really like about Matt's practice as an artist is that he isn't afraid to try new things. So always experimenting. And right now his work is very, very decorative and fired in ways that are not necessarily about wood firing. So he gets kudos from me for being an experimenter, not afraid to do something different. And then that was me getting ready, hoping that I would get to fire the Onagama this year. And actually that's the Nabori Gama, the new kiln that, that Charlie Lidd and I are building outside the studio right now. And we're a little bit further along than that photograph now. So we're about ready to put the arches in, and feeling sad that we're not firing the Onagama. So thank you very much, and everybody stay safe. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Bruce. We let you go on that one because you deserve a good shout out tonight. That's awesome. You know, I look at those surfaces, that platter with the round circles looks like a moth to me. I am taken by that fire and how it works its way through a kiln and how we can steer and drive it like water in the stream. It's really amazing. It's one of the reasons why I come here, and talking about the way that people share and people collaborate and people, you know, share their secrets with each other. I don't think we find that anywhere else more present than in a crafts community. And I think, you know, that was testament to all of that tonight. Our next speaker tonight will be Hanna Vogel. And Hanna Vogel is an artist and educator living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She grew up in rural Northern California and received a BFA from the California College of the Arts and an MFA from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. In her work, she uses craft-based materials and techniques in a non-traditional ways to make sculptures and installations that explore aspects of entropy in the natural world. She has exhibited her work nationally and internationally, including the Huntington Museum of Art, the Spartanburg Art Museum, Delaware Art Museum, and the Biblioteca Henestrosa in Oaxaca, Mexico. She has presented at conferences and published papers internationally and has received numerous fellowships and grants. Welcome, Hanna Vogel.
Thank you, Beth. And hey, everyone. It's nice to be with you all in the virtual world this evening. So I'm going to share with you images of a couple different installations from two of my recent bodies of work. And in both these bodies of work, I'm investigating similar ideas of material, structure, spatial surroundings, and embodiment. In both of them, I like to use familiar materials, but in non-traditional ways in order to explore the conceptual relationships between material and structure. And I want to know how the meanings of objects and the spaces that they define change when the materials and then the forms that they make are somewhat at odds. So in my ceramic work, I use specifically porcelain because of its physical characteristics of delicacy and fragility, as well as its connotations of preciousness and historically also of scarcity. I make these lattice-like structures without any walls so that there's no specific barrier between the internal and the surrounding space. And in that way, I find that they embody a kind of minimalism so that the visual experience of the work is exclusively the experience of its structure and there aren't really any hidden parts in there. And then when I take those lattices to a larger scale, I want to explore the relationship between this really fragile material and more architectural forms. When I think about architecture, I think of it in terms of these built structures that are really designed to protect our bodies within them. So the arch that the lattices form in this piece is big enough to walk under and around. And with that scale, I want to subvert the normal or expected relationship between the viewer's body and the built environment. And instead, I'm casting the viewer as a caretaker of our surroundings rather than being able to rely on them to protect us. And in doing so, I want to create a sort of heightened awareness of the way that we move our bodies through space and the potential impact that we have on all these objects and the space that surrounds us. So in addition to those ideas of material and the built environment, I also find myself really influenced by aspects of nature, both formally and conceptually. I took this image a few years ago, and it's apparently of an invasive species, and this was in the middle of winter, and I just thought it was like really starkly beautiful, and that picture really stuck with me. And you can see it was also rather formally inspiring. So this installation is part of the second body of work that I'm going to talk about, and it's primarily fibers based. So with this piece that was inspired by that invasive species, I was thinking about it not as something that grows up towards the sunlight, but rather as like a sort of root structure. Like if that's the second floor of this building were to start to grow roots that were growing down towards the ground underneath. And in doing so, in that downward growth, they're really kind of invading and blocking the space in the room that's normally reserved for human use and movement. And in blocking it that way, it really required people to either walk all the way around the outside of the installation or sort of carefully pick their way through it. So the way that I make these pieces is with sort of sculptural wire basketry, which is the workshop that I was going to teach at Peters Valley this summer. And it's a sort of simple 3-part weave that is pretty versatile. You can make anything any size from like an inch across to 15 feet plus. After I weave the wire forms, hang on. After I weave the wire forms, I pour paper pulp over them. So that's what this little video is. And as the pulp sits on the wire, and when it's drying, it starts to shrink, and then it clings and creates the sort of stretch tight skin. But before it dries, all that water content of the pulp acts on the steel wire and starts to rust it. And then that rust seeps through and really sort of stains the paper permanently. And I'm interested in rust as sort of marker of the passage of time. And I want to use my work to help us to psychologically locate ourselves, not just in space, but also temporally. When I think about that locating within time, I'm thinking about it in terms of a tension between growth and decay. So the cocoon-like forms in this installation, I feel like their really full volume is talking about new life and nurturing and sort of this transformative and potential growth. But then when you get up close, you realize they're actually a lot less solid and perhaps less capable of sustaining and nurturing life than they seemed from a distance. With this installation, I was also exploring the idea of the cocoon, but I wanted them to feel a little bit more approachable, but also precarious, so smaller size and held higher up above the floor. I'm interested in the idea of cocoons as dwellings that are ideally protective, but in this reality anyway, actually rather precarious. I'm interested in how finding delicacy when we expect solidity can make us reassess our understanding both of ourselves and of our surroundings. With this work, I added the stems underneath in order to really emphasize their height and the way they delicately balance above the floor. And as an installation artist, I really like how varying heights as well as relative to the body size can influence our understanding of what the work means, as well as what we might signify in relationship to it. So thinking about height, I think a lot about things like swallows' nests, which are also these sites of growth and nurturing that cluster together for power in numbers. And they always seem to be built really high up out of reach of any ground-dwelling animals or people. I was thinking about swallows' nests when I made the 2 sculptures of this installation. And nests with these sort of egg-like forms as sites of growth and nurturing, but then that sort of new life potential is again undermined by that sort of material decay. I was also thinking about the idea of a pedestal, which is so much a part of a lot of sculpture, and what it means when we talk about putting something up on a pedestal. It's like it's up there because we want to be like it, or because we revere it in some way. But in keeping things up on their pedestals, we're also keeping them confined. And that enforced isolation and separation from the space that we inhabit, I think, tells us something not just about what we think of these objects, but also what we think about ourselves and the way that we might potentially impact their life cycles. I also think a lot about entropy in terms of landscape. So with this piece, I was thinking about tide pools in Northern California, which is where I'm originally from, but I was envisioning them in a more sort of post-climate apocalypse desert environment. And I wanted to have this piece very transparently raised up on these steel supports underneath as a way to emphasize its lightness and fragility. And in being able to walk around it and revealing its construction as a metaphor for the constructed relationship, or the constructed nature of our relationship between ourselves and the environments around us, and hopefully just as a reminder of the impact that we have on them. And this is my most recent large-scale installation from just the very end of last year. With this, I was again thinking about approaches to that balance between growth and decay. The growth patterns with this one are like mitosis and cell division that alludes to an expansion of the body in a way that feels slightly out of control, maybe on the edge of collapse. I wanted to play with more of a variation scale. So the smallest ones are about 1 foot, and that big one in the back is like 7 feet. And I found in watching people interact with the work that that really kind of changed the way that they moved through the space. And then there's ones crawling up the wall. It's like they're trying to expand almost beyond their own physical limitations. So with this work, I want to reference and then subvert these familiar landscape structures, growth forms, in order to highlight their delicacy and precariousness. And as an installation artist, I really also want to know how our bodies function as these mobile objects within these spaces. And I hope that ultimately it can help to foster a bit of compassion for the spaces, structures, and environments around us, as well as for ourselves as these integral living parts of them. And that is it. Thank you.
Awesome timing. Thank you, Hannah. So the delicate balance of all of that and the negative space and those shadows. You know, if this was a dinner, this would be the dessert. You know, this is just a wonderful, wonderful thing for me. And then it's something I can carry through all the way through the week and kind of think about it, and keeps us going. Sorry to say, but we have our last speaker coming up, and his name is Michael Connelly. Michael is a potter in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and as well as assistant professor at Montgomery County College in Community College in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania. In 2010, he founded the Bailey Street Arts Corridor in the Brewerytown neighborhood of Philadelphia. He received his BFA and MFA from Alfred University in Alfred, New York. Connelly has taught and presented lectures and workshops at various venues nationally and internationally, including classes at Alfred University, Haystack School of Craft, Alberta College of Art and Design, Archie Bray Foundation, and Penland School of Crafts. His utilitarian pottery is in the permanent collections of numerous museums. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I started, or I began my kind of life at Peters Valley. So if you can you see my screen, by the way?
Yes, everything's great.
Okay, good. So the image on the right is me in 1995, and a fellow named Jim Jasma, who was head of the ceramics program at the time. And I kept coming back to Peters Valley pretty much until they kicked me out. So it's near and dear to my heart. So thank you for the introduction. So I spend my time between Philadelphia and Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. So I teach, I make things, I raise a kid, and I kind of build on property that I fell into sort of by accident in a sense. So I have to kind of maintain those. So I kind of keep 3 pretty tight or active jobs. And you know, sometimes one job is going to sort of hesitate and lead into the other one. So it's like a breathing breathing thing that I have to deal with all the time. So at any rate, we'll start. So I'm kind of interested in history, but also kind of where history begins, but also where history is currently. So I have some property, or we lived up in North Philadelphia in Strawberry Mansion and Brewery Town, and there were all these just beautiful homes at the time that were created by, work that was made outside of Trenton and called Trent Tiles. They were just beautifully executed homes, and basically they've turned over years to have a lot of problems, and like this home on the right hand side here, it's called missing teeth. So what's happening right now with these properties are there's newer homes being built onto them, and it's just very awkward. So before these get torn down is kind of where I would like to be, what I like to see in a sense. So that's kind of what, I'm looking at constantly when I'm in Philadelphia. So accidental form of writing. So just things you kind of come across, whether it's this, I don't even know what it is, but it's like the Wile E. Coyote kind of wall that, or the Roadrunner wall that stops Wile E. Coyote. And then the image on the right is of when I was peeling off a veneer on a home, and there was this glue underneath it. So it's a kind of a glue that stuck a veneer onto plaster. And then when you pull it apart, you see this remarkable texture. So it's like, do you stop here? These are just the kind of things that you could not do if you tried. So I think they're very, very lovely, very beautiful. Other things, so form of writing is decoration. So, being around North Philly, you see a lot of different graffiti on buildings or on, tractor trailers or things like that. So there's different styles and everything of that communication, as well as, in contrast of looking at a Persian bowl, where the form of writing is around the exterior of the lip. So the form of writing is the decoration, which to me is kind of no different than kind of the communication in North Philly. So likewise, kind of as decoration, so this block of homes on the left-hand side has now been renovated. So when a home gets renovated, the graffiti stops. So that form of sort of communication stops when the renovation starts. So it's really like an interesting layer to me. In contrast with a Korean bottle that might have been decorated by a kid, or might have been decorated by a family at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when they were about to quit and they were just done with this pot. So I think there's these just immediate marks that are very beautiful to me and dear to me. Some of my work, just kind of work at a table and work in the neighborhood. So contrast. So work, I try to, my work is sort of all over the place. Like me, I jump around between high and low fired work. I like learning more about making the pots, which I make a ton of them, is kind of the learning about the history of the area. So learning about taxation and how like a farmhouse was taxed on the windows or the closets, or in the city, learning about taxation where it was, the frontage of a building, Philadelphia, it's very skinny and then very long. So homes were taxed on the frontage of the building, not how deep they are. So kind of learning about all that. So, I'm just thinking about these things as I'm making pots. So right here, this is making a spout of one of these pitchers, which are on the left and the right. And what it is I'm creating kind of a delivery or sort of balance in the pot. So if somebody's going to pick this pot up and it's full of water, it's going to pour itself. So the balance, it's all about the balance and that delivery. So pot on the left is a soda fired pot with some sort of lower fire flowers on top of it, and then a wood fired pot on the right. So I think about things like, cul-de-sac means bottom of the bag, no way out, that kind of thing. I like to make, when I sit down, I make a ton of pots. I don't really think about where they're going, kind of like the cul-de-sac in itself. But I like to be able to, you know, sort of create these sort of subdivisions of my work and lay them out and glaze them. So I'm kind of like a scared person. I'm scared of empty space. I'm scared of walls. That's why behind you, there's no picture on the wall. I'm sort of scared of, you know, putting something up and needing to leave. So the same thing is, I'm scared of my work in general, of it being too blank. So I have to put a bunch of layers or information onto the work so that I can understand it a little bit more. You couldn't just say, okay, glaze this thing. It would have to be touched at every part of the process. So here's my son. So with you know, everything going online lately since March, you know, you've got a assistant. So this is him catching some trimmings from this bowl here. So we're trying to be creative with all of our time that we have together. So we're going to be online again this fall. So we're going to be doing a lot of this together, I would assume. So some more pots and just ways to find out more about my work. So on the left, there's some soda-fired cups. I'm into the erosion of work, of putting down a glaze like this pitcher. The pitcher is a satin glaze that was sort of attacked by salt. It's a salt kiln. So the salt hits the surface and it will turn that satin glaze into more of a gloss and also kind of pocket or blister it. So I'm kind of into not having control after having super control when I make. So when I'm making something, I'm overly kind of analyzing it and making it function, knowing that, say in this pitcher that you're going to be putting liquid into it, it has a water weight. So I have to make that pot really light, but also I don't want to have control after I make it. I just want it to be done and out of my face. So also about, you know, there's a plate in the middle here. This is a low fire plate that's just kind of layered. And I've been, you know, just sort of thinking about the city and how, again, taxation might happen, or learning about, you know, an alleyway and how that was affordable then and how it is affordable now. That's it for my images, and I appreciate your time. And yeah, it was really great seeing everybody's work. And thanks so much for watching mine. Thank you.
You are welcome, Michael. I thought we'd end on a high note with you, and we sure did. So, you know, we miss you all, and we want you here, and we love these opportunities, and just, you know, come back every Friday because we're here for you. That includes our instructor presentation for tonight, and I hope that this week was an inspiration for you, and I hope that it will carry you through the week, and that, you know, mark your calendars. Every Friday night, 7 p.m., we'll meet again. Thank you so much for all these talented artists that came out tonight, and you all have a great week and stay well. Bye-bye.